Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time it is for you. I'm Nikki Acosta, Cloud Evangelist at Cisco. Welcome to Cloud Unfiltered, where we talk all things cloud. We have a great guest with us today, Dave Lively, one of Cisco's very own. Dave, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Nikki. Glad to be here with you this morning and with everybody else out there across the internets. I am a director in the product management team inside of Cisco's cloud group. So we're focusing on software products to help Cisco customers, use and take advantage of cloud on-prem or off-prem.
Awesome. And how did you find yourself? You've been at Cisco for a minute. How did you get into tech to begin with?
No, it's a good question. I've been at Cisco for longer than a minute. I've been in tech for kind of as long as I can remember. Just early on, I was, geeking out with my dad on early computers. We started with the Atari 800 XL was my first computer way back in the day. My dad had big Zenith and Heathkit computers that he put together himself, big 8-inch floppies. So we've been doing computers almost ever since there's been computers. First programs were writing basic programs to draw lines on the screen. So I've been at it for a while.
And I did read that you are an adrenaline junkie. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's my email address. Don't spam it, please. But I've been doing sort of crazy stuff for a long time. I got into rock climbing when I was in college. I've done mountain climbing. I've summited Mount Shasta in California, Mount Rainier up in Washington. I raced motorcycles back early in the day. I race bicycles now, mountain biking, road biking. So if it's got a little bit of a push myself element to it, then I'm kind of into it.
So you're a little crazy, is what you're trying to say, and
Just
a little hippie, maybe too.
No, I don't know. Hippie is probably not the word I'd use to describe myself. So I don't know anyone else that I know
of. Right. That's me. So, we were talking before the show and, we were talking about kind of just the amount of change that Cisco Cloud has gone through. And you were very involved in sort of, this, first of all, in OpenStack. I mean, you were involved in OpenStack from a very, very long time ago. You care to date yourself in your experience with OpenStack so far?
Yeah, so the first time I was working with OpenStack was back when I was in our systems group at Cisco, and we were building sort of infrastructure-based systems for service providers to build like hosting services off of. We were using VMware at the time. We were looking at OpenStack, but deemed it a little bit too immature at the time. That was back in the, I want to say, Cactus release, if I remember correctly. First OpenStack Summit I actually attended, I want to say it was down in San Diego. I think that might have been the Folsom one down in San Diego, where networking got introduced as a first-class citizen. It was Quantum at the time, back when we were allowed to call it Quantum before we had to change the name. So
to Neutron, right?
Yeah.
And so you've probably seen a lot of change in networking, but going back to sort of, your cloud experiences, Intercloud, right, was a thing for Cisco. We've kind of withdrawn from that, just based on market conditions. Is there anything else you want to add to that part?
No, I mean, I'd say when we started off on Intercloud, this is going back 3.5 or 4 years at that point. The focus was we need to build a cloud platform internally to host Cisco's applications, our Collab, Spark, mobility, security, IoT, those types of applications. And along the way, as we were talking with more service providers were interested in trying to offer public cloud style services, self-service experiences to give them something, to give their customers something similar to what Amazon was offering. And they didn't really want to try to build it themselves. And so, we had this idea that, we'd be able to take what we're already building at Cisco, drop regions of it into service providers' data centers. We'd still run it as Cisco, so we could get the scale from an operations perspective and an engineering perspective, but then service providers would then sell it to their customers, use it for their own applications, sell our applications and services on top, et cetera. So it was an interesting journey for me. I moved from being sort of what I would say on the vendor side in cloud, where I'm selling the boxes, selling the software, to being the operator. Suddenly we were building and operating a cloud, 24/7 DevOps, everything, and it was a great experience. Fast forward 3 years, the pace is so fast, and I think that we've arrived where most of our customers have arrived as well, which is There's a few big hyperscale providers, Amazon, Azure, Google, that have such a size and scale advantage that they're just light years ahead of most other people in terms of building things on a public cloud scale. We actually still have the same cloud running internally at Cisco because just like our customers, there's a number of workloads that we want to, for whatever reason, control, compliance, security. We want to be able to run those on-prem, keep them in Cisco data centers. So we still have some of the regions that are still up and running, still supporting workloads, still based on OpenStack. It's the same thing we built before. We're just we've sort of refocused to where we started, which is hosting Cisco workloads, and then the external Cisco SaaS applications, they're running where a lot of our customers sort of externally focused applications are running, which is up in public cloud.
And so what are you specifically tasked with now?
So right now I'm working on the private cloud side of things here at Cisco. So, again, most people still have a large number of workloads and applications that are running on-prem. And so, we're trying to give our on-prem customers the same sort of self-service, use services experience that they get when leveraging public cloud, but doing it on-prem in their private cloud. It's the meta cloud experience, and we're working on some stuff to add some more features and capabilities into that.
So is it more intended for sort of the developer audience that might use sort of an AWS, or are they, is this more oriented towards IT?
Well, the answer is both, right? And so, ultimately the purchasers inside an enterprise tend to be IT. It's the developers live in the lines of business. They do the development. IT is more in charge of, a lot of the spending, a lot of the security postures and policies, a lot of the networking postures and policies. So, the developers ultimately don't care if it's running in a public cloud or running in a private cloud. They care about being able to get the virtual infrastructure as fast as they need it, scale it up when they need it, do everything self-service, everything through an API. They don't want to have to open trouble tickets to add a user or to increase their quota or things like that. They're used to that self-service experience. They want to continue it. They don't care if it's on-prem or off. IT does. And so IT tends to be a little bit more of the buyer. If they can set up and maintain and operate an infrastructure on-prem that looks and feels to their developers the same as Amazon or Google or Microsoft off-prem, then that's going to be a win on both sides.
So you mentioned Google, Azure, Microsoft, and as someone who's kind of in the market, maybe evaluating cloud providers, most people would probably think of Cisco as a networking company, not a cloud provider. But as we were talking about earlier in the show, you don't believe that's a very fair assessment. Why?
No, certainly it's easy to look at Cisco and just say, yeah, you're a networking company, because that's where our roots were. That's how we started a long time ago. But if you look at the portfolio of products and capabilities across Cisco right now, yeah, we've still got a data center group, and that data center group produces servers and switches for data centers. And we've still got networking groups that are building routers and switches and things like that. But in terms of cloud, if you're thinking just purely a cloud infrastructure provider like an Amazon AWS or like Azure or like Google Cloud Platform, then yeah, Cisco's probably not who you're thinking of when you're looking to go to public cloud. But when you're looking at leveraging cloud services, whether it's collaboration capabilities with our Spark systems, whether you're looking to do IoT applications, whether you're looking to do cloud security and secure stuff on-prem and in the cloud, whether you're looking to do networking, and Cisco's Cloud Services Router, actually one of the more popular items in Amazon's marketplace, because enterprise customers are looking to leverage that same networking sort of expertise and constructs and policies that they've built on-prem, extend those up into their public cloud. So we may not be a cloud infrastructure provider, but a lot of cloud services from Cisco. And when it comes to all those workloads that customers want to keep on-prem, increasingly they're turning to Cisco for the infrastructure on-prem to run those cloud workloads as well.
In a private cloud.
In a private cloud, that's right. Or in a hosted cloud. I mean, not all private clouds are on-prem in a data center. Some are out in colo spaces or in hosting providers as well.
So I asked Kip the same question last week, but what are you seeing in the service provider space? Obviously, it's a very, very different market than your traditional enterprise or mid-sized company. But what is the allure for service provider companies currently?
Yeah, I mean, I think service providers, it's an interesting time for them, right? And service providers are, if you looked a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I'd say there were a lot of service providers that were looking to be cloud providers, IaaS providers. And it was a big, how do we build IaaS? OpenStack was big in service providers for building IaaS. If I look at where most of the service provider interest is these days, it's gotten less off of the IaaS path. I'll take Telstra as a great example. Telstra, they partner with Azure, they partner with Amazon, they partner with a number of public cloud providers. They still have their own cloud, leverage cloud for building their own applications and services. And so as they want to build network-oriented services, but are leveraging being able to spin up things like firewalls or VPNs or things like that, spin those up in a private cloud environment inside their data centers. They provide cloud connectivity back and forth to different cloud providers. And so service providers are still very much in the cloud game, but it's not an IaaS game for a lot of them anymore. Because again, the hyperscale providers are really winning at that. I think there's plenty of service providers out there who still have opportunities in sort of a niche IaaS play. Data sovereignty is a really interesting thing to consider as we start looking at this, because more and more customers are less comfortable with my data can just be anywhere. As there's security incidents in the cloud. We all remember the Target ones. There's things that may cause some people not want to keep everything in the cloud, or maybe people in Europe don't want United States companies or United States government be able to access their cloud, so they want to keep things in their country. So there's still a lot of opportunities. It's even though Amazon, Microsoft, Google are way ahead in terms of scale, there's still a lot of opportunities, especially more on the niche side or country specific side.
In addition to sovereignty too, I kind of see, Cisco seeing cloud from two different directions. And that's like sort of the bottoms up network infrastructure up, but then, also through our acquisition of AppDynamics and Clicker, kind of seeing it from the application level down. And there seems to be sort of, different schools of thought, even within Cisco, about what the definition of cloud is. But where do you see this playing out longer term?
Yeah, the definition of cloud is very cloudy, and it means different things to different people. But I'd say from a networking perspective, there is no more network-centric world than cloud. In cloud, everything is across the network, sitting somewhere. Nothing's running locally. Everything is across some network. So networking plays a huge role in cloud. Maybe plays a different role, but it's still absolutely a huge role. And in an ideal world, customers don't want to have to learn and do different types of networking as they connect to different types of clouds. So if they can keep networking consistent, even as they may run, serverless workloads up in Amazon because they're enamored with Lambda these days, or they're building their .NET applications up in Azure because that's the obvious place to do that, or maybe even taking advantage of Oracle's new cloud. Haven't talked about them, but if you're running big Oracle databases and you want to be able to develop applications running on Oracle and put those up in the cloud, there's probably no better cloud to run those applications that are connected to an Oracle database than have been Oracle. So people are going to use multiple clouds, but if they can keep their networking capabilities consistent across those, security, you want to be able to apply security policies consistently across those, and as well as on-prem, where you're going to keep some of your workloads as well. So the answer, and this is where you see Cisco's strategy evolving towards, much more focused around multi-cloud and how do we help our customers, run their applications, control the networking to their applications, control the security around their applications, monitor the performance of their applications, get into AppDynamics, regardless of where they sit, whether it's in one of the public clouds, whether it's in private cloud, multiple private clouds. The reality is few people, Netflix is the obvious, counterexample to prove the point, but few people are absolutely 100% all in one public cloud.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I've worked with a lot of, I'll say, smaller companies and startup type companies where they don't have sort of this technical debt. They don't have this baggage of having to make sure that everything new that they do integrates with something that they've had for a while.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like there's any larger company in the world that's going to be able to just snap their fingers and completely move everything to the cloud. It's just not going to happen, not anytime soon.
Some do, right? And some have tried to snap their fingers and are moving hundreds of applications up into the cloud. It's not a short journey. It's not an easy journey, and the reality is there's some workloads, just like mainframes are still around, right? Even though the x86 transition and beat those out decades ago, probably at this point, there's still stuff that runs in mainframes. There's still stuff that's going to run on-prem, even when you're going quote unquote all in on cloud. And even in startups, by the way, small companies start acquiring technical debt the day they start developing, because especially in today's MVP focused climate where it's, it's ship it, or deliver it. You don't ship things these days.
I think there's
In the
actually an
cloud.
F-bomb word in there. In the
Yeah,
the
could
version
be.
that I've
I'm gonna
heard.
stay away from that one. But
So
you start creating technical debt right away. You make decisions to get something out and release it quickly. As soon as you make that decision, you may lock yourself onto a particular database because that was the one you knew and you could go fastest. But as soon as you started going and you're a few months into it and you've now done all your database calls to that particular database, now you're locked in, and now it gets hard to change. And so it's easy to create technical debt and lock yourself in, especially on public cloud these days. It's really easy to, early on in the process, take advantage of all the different services that either Microsoft or Amazon or Google that they offer beyond infrastructure. But as soon as you start using their proprietary databases, etc., you're now, I'm not gonna say you're locked in, but it's now much harder to change and evolve.
oh, they're pretty sticky. I mean, they make it
Yeah.
really easy for you to take data and put it in the cloud, but it's very hard to get it out.
Yeah, they'll even ship a semi up to your door to help the data in, but I don't think they'll run the semi the other way though.
Right. So yeah, I saw that on the keynote. I was like, wow, that's a pretty awesome keynote. So let's talk about containers for a minute, because I have been sort of sorting through the plethora of containers now for a while, and I sort of had this definition in my head of what the intent was for containers, but I'm starting to realize that containers are starting to be used for a lot more things further down in the stack than just applications. And so Project Conti comes to mind. It's a open source Cisco container networking thing that we contribute to and we support. Can you give us kind of the network containers versus application containers definition?
Sure.
And comparison?
Sure. So containers, containers have been around in Linux for a long time. They've only recently started to become a bit more prevalent, and it's really around sort of the changes in how people are building applications and moving from sort of build it as one big monolithic application to start breaking down your application into the smallest fundamental building blocks that you can break it down into. And the easy, obvious early example, and it's not necessarily container specific, but it's a sort of a discussion on how to start changing your applications is, let's say you've got an image sharing service, go back to, think Flickr, something like that, where, you want to be, if you wrote it as an application that does everything, including reading new images in, serving new images out, etc., then anytime you wanted to scale up on one side, you wanted to be able to ingest a bunch more images, then that affected everything. So the first thing, let's break down my image reads from my image writes, for example. And if I can start serving those from sort of different mini applications that are running in different virtual machines, at the point, or different physical computers, I start breaking up that application. Now with containers and microservices, if I keep breaking that application down into smaller and smaller components, great, now I can run each of those in their own container, and now containers start to become a lot more effective than VMs, because as I start to break those things down into smaller and smaller pieces, I don't want the overhead that I get with a virtual machine in every instance. I don't want the time it takes to boot up. I don't need my own dedicated operating system. I don't need my own dedicated kernel. I don't need all those dedicated things that I got in a virtual machine or a physical machine. I just need a namespace to be able to operate in that's isolated from other things. And then if one particular component dies, then that's a small component. I've typically got multiple of them that I'm load balancing across. One dies, I just spin up another one next to it, and containers are great for that. But containers, you start thinking about what you're doing with containers. Again, it's just another virtual compute sort of thing. And so you have to orchestrate spinning those up. You have to schedule spinning those up. You have to network them together. And so the problems in the container space are not fundamentally different than the problems that we had in the virtual machine space around isolation and networking and connectivity, et cetera, which is why most people, and this, everyone that's running containers up in public cloud, they're all running them in VMs. You use VMs for isolation from a networking component. You keep clusters of containers in a few VMs, and then you can spit up more VMs for a different container cluster, et cetera. But the thing that we saw with networking, and why Conti got started a couple years at Cisco, was that a lot of the early networking didn't take advantage of anything you could do in the infrastructure. It was all focused purely on network overlays, and it was just VLANs. And so we wanted to build container networking that gave enterprises the flexibility to use the same type of networking constructs, whether it was layer 3, whether it was layer 2, whether it was overlays that they did in VMs, that they did in physical networking. Now we wanted to be able to enable those in container networking as well, to then help integrate containers into the rest of their environments. Because again, think back to sort of the shift. You're not going all in and now everything's in a container. You maybe have some of the front end sort of web parts of your application that are running in containers, or maybe some of the message queues, things like that, spun up in containers. Your database, probably not spinning up in a container at this point. It's probably sitting in a virtual machine, or it's sitting on big hunk and bare metal if you got a big database. And so application networking is about being able to pull all the different parts of your application together, whether they live in containers, whether they live in virtual machines, whether they live directly on bare metal.
And so Contiv will give you a way to kind of bring together, various components of a workload that might be on different types of infrastructure. Is that?
Right now it's focused on containers, but because we have the ability to do networking and different types of networking, whether it's overlays, whether it's layer 2, whether it's layer 3, we can very easily integrate the networking constructs that are in your containers with the things that live on VMs or live on bare metal, because those are the things that are on the same VLAN or can talk to each other via layer 3, et cetera. So we basically added a bunch more networking capabilities to containers. And then the other thing we did was enable you to set application level policies and apply a policy to a container. Think isolation. So these containers get the application policy, and the application policy says I can talk to the internet, or I can talk to the database tier. For example, the database tier can't talk to the internet, but can talk to the application tier. So you can start to set these policies, and those policies are independent of the machines that they're running on, things like that. So as I spin up more containers with a particular policy, I can define the policies once and then be able to spin up containers. I'll go back to OpenStack. It's like security groups in OpenStack. And then we can take that and we can tie it to the physical networking, like with Cisco's ACI, for example, where we can now marry the policy constructs in Contiv with your policy constructs within ACI. So now you can have the benefits from a performance and security perspective of your physical network infrastructure implementing the same policies that are being defined up at the container level. So it's pretty powerful once you start to marry the two together.
So that sounds great if I'm a network admin or if I'm in IT. But if I'm a developer and I hear you talk about this, I might say, great, you're trying to put more rules on me and I'm just going to go use public cloud.
No, so
does this become invisible to the developers who are actually using the services?
Yeah, so just like the constructs are the same. You go to public cloud and Amazon, you still have to define a security group. You still have to define your security policies. You don't get away with it. Well, you could get away from it by just doing open, but that's a very bad thing from a security perspective. So even as a developer, you still have to think about this. But what we've done is to think about this now with Contiv, you don't have to configure a switch. You don't have to configure the network. You define a networking policy. They already understand how to do those. And networking policies are things like, admit this CIDR block, admit these ports. So it's the same types of things that you do in security groups in OpenStack or setting up your security in Amazon example. Now you're doing the same types of things with containers on-prem, or you could run it in the cloud as well. You can take our Contiv stuff and bring your own Kubernetes or Docker scheduler and run it on VMs in Amazon or Google, for example.
Cool. That's awesome. Thank you for breaking that down for us. So
No
what else
problem.
have you been working on, Dave? Anything else cool?
Anything else cool? So the one thing I'm passionate about today, and I think is ultimately the way things are going to go is more of a SaaS type model, even for on-premise infrastructure. And so today things tend to be sort of fairly strongly situated around, it's in the cloud and I don't run any of the infrastructure, or it's on my prem and damn it, I'm running all of the infrastructure and I need absolute control, et cetera. And certainly some people do want full control, full customization, et cetera. But I would argue that a lot of customers, what they really want out of private cloud is the ability to run things on-prem, but with the ease of having to not worry about infrastructure, not worrying about how to upgrade software and do all that, not worrying about the life cycle of the underlying platform. They just want to run their applications and they want to be able to do that on-prem. That requires a little bit more of a SaaS model. It's not a, I wouldn't call it a managed service. Some people call it managed services. Managed services to me are more like a bespoke, I am operating and managing your network for you as an entity, and they tend to be more bespoke. Yours is a little bit different than the next guy, than the next guy, than the next guy. I liken it to what's happening with Meraki. If you've seen and used Cisco's Meraki, what it is cloud managed wireless. And so I've got it running at my house. I love it. In the past, if I wanted to set things up, I'd have to, I get my own wireless router, and then you log into that wireless router, and I'd configure whatever policies or things like that I need to do. I did it when I was at home. If there was a software upgrade, I did the software upgrade, and I had to manage and run it all myself. I had to take care of all the care and feeding of that thing myself. Now with Meraki, I've got even more functionality, because now Meraki's adding features at a pace that you can do in SaaS. So this is one of the other benefits to SaaS, is it enables the developers of the SaaS application to innovate much more quickly, because they only have to deploy it once to one place, to the cloud, as opposed to building a software update that then they ship on-prem to everyone, and then everyone has to upgrade, and then you've got people on 80 different versions, and how do you support that, and what's your test matrix look like, and it starts to get pretty kind of crazy pretty quickly. When you do it, it's much easier from a developer perspective. You can innovate much more quickly, iterate, roll out more features more quickly, and now I can manage my network no matter where I am. I can be sitting in a hotel in Germany after going to the KubeCon conference and be able to hit my Meraki network and see the policies. I still configure everything. I still administer my network. I run it. I set the policies. I says who can do what, etc. But I don't have to run the software that does all of that. And I think we need to see a little bit more of a revolution in private cloud around that as well. There's a lot of compelling reasons to want to be able to do stuff on-prem. I'd say that one of the reasons why public cloud, or why private cloud is not as successful these days compared to public, is because no one's yet really given customers the public cloud experience on-prem. So I'm kind of passionate about trying to figure out how to do that. I'll be honest, I think that the technical and more cultural and organizational, because and I'll use Cisco as an example, right? Cisco, and I'll go back to wireless. Cisco as a company, we have a team of folks in IT that maintain our wireless infrastructure, and they set all the policies, they log in, they do all the stuff with the routers, etc. If we were to suddenly adopt Meraki, Cisco-wide as a company, that group of people in IT, they wouldn't have that same job to do anymore. And that's kind of an extreme example, but I think you're going to see that as you move into data center and private cloud. Is it's the people in IT's job to run the private cloud, to run OpenStack, to run Kubernetes, to run Red Hat OpenShift, or whatever platform they're trying to use on-prem. And there's a culture change that needs to happen there. They've given up that control in public cloud, but their mindset is not around yet giving up that control on-prem, even though to me it's much the same thing.
Yeah, you still need an admin, right?
Admin to set all your policies and do stuff. The question is whether or not you're operating the underlying software. Are you the one who's monitoring it, who's getting alerts, who's like, oh shit, the server just went down and now I got to go in, I got to log in and I got to troubleshoot. Are you doing all of that, or is somebody else?
Right. And I can see where that would be difficult for some people, because there's some people who, like you said, they're worried about sort of relinquishing that control because they're afraid that their job might go away.
Right.
Do you think that there's still sort of this good old boys network when it comes to infrastructure that's kind of fighting off kind of these millennials who are coming in with their t-shirts and their jeans and their fancy sneakers?
I don't know. I'm probably old enough to be a good old boy, but I've got my t-shirt on right now. But
hey, you're wearing a t-shirt.
I would say that yeah, there's a lot of people that have been doing something the same way for a long time, and change is hard, right? I mean, change in a company to do something fundamentally different than you've been doing it. It's hard. DevOps is the same way, right? The change to a mindset where you're not just developing software to give to somebody else, but that you're developing software that you're on the hook to run yourself, to monitor yourself. It's a mindset difference, and it's not. I've seen it in companies. I've seen it at Cisco. Not everyone makes that transition. Not everyone can make that jump. But things are changing, and the millennials and sort of the new people coming in, they'll question everything just for questioning everything's sake. And so it's the same struggle that has happened time and time again throughout history. But the role of IT as companies move more towards digital and are doing more things digital, it's a different role. It doesn't mean there's not one. It's different than it was before, and you need a different skill set. You need to, and it's good for you from a career perspective to be evolving yourself and learning new stuff continually anyway.
So I'm your employee, Dave, and I come to you and I say, Dave, I'm kind of worried because I feel like, my skills aren't that relevant. I might want to learn something new. Like, what should I go learn? What would you tell me?
Skill?
Yes.
So I'm assuming you're in IT. I'd start, looking at how to I'd start thinking about microservices, how to build and deploy applications differently, and how to leverage multiple environments to do that. I mean, that's the skill. It's more about how do you develop and run your applications in multiple locations depending upon what's most optimized for that application. That's where I'd sort of focus these days. And the other area, I think, and this is back to what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about sort of the power of a cloud business model to fundamentally change the way people look at things and do things. Because once you can just from any device, hit a portal that lives up in the cloud and get access to all of the data that's being generated by things, and start to get insights out of that data, it really can fundamentally change the way that you approach things. I think it has massive power to continue to change healthcare. I think it's going to evolve education. I think it's going to evolve a lot of industries. We're already seeing it turn retail completely upside down. And so the cloud model of sort of delivering applications and services, self-service via a platform, via APIs, that's where I'd focus.
Money. Well, that's great advice, Dave. Is there anything else you wanna add? You are on Twitter at Dave Lively.
Yep.
If folks want to follow you, right? Is that right?
Yeah, if they want to follow me, they'll be pretty bored at the moment if they follow me, though. I'll be honest, I'm more of a lurker than a strong contributor in the Twitter sphere
And
these days. So.
You have any talks, or are you going to be at any events coming up? OpenStack?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not going to be at Red Hat or OpenStack coming up. So I'm not going to be at either of those conferences. I was just at Cisco Live not too long ago, but nothing immediately coming up on the agenda for me. Thankfully, it's going to be a little bit of a quiet travel season. Well,
I'll have a drink for you. Cheers. And you can spare yourself a fail on an airline experience potentially.
Yeah, that's I won't make any United reaccommodation plans. So.
Oh, I won't share my endorsement either. I don't want to get in trouble here. Anything else you want to add, Dave? You are always just such a ball of energy and just so knowledgeable. And honestly, Dave, if I can tell you the truth, you've come around quite a bit from an infrastructure guy to like really kind of getting this cloud thing. It's been really cool to kind of see people who have kind of like I don't know what it is, but like some people, they just all of a sudden it clicks and they get it, and you've gotten it for a while, and it just comes out so naturally for you these days.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, look, I love this space. I love this environment. You neglected to talk about, you said I've been at Cisco for a minute. I actually just celebrated my 20-year anniversary a couple of months ago, so a little longer than a minute. But although I've been at the same company for 20 years, sort of the thing that's been great for me, and one of the things I love about Cisco as a company, is I've done a lot of different things in those 20 years. I've moved jobs typically every few years. I've moved on to doing something new, and Cisco's enabled me to sort of stay at the forefront of where I like to be and want to be. At Cisco, you can be a pure infrastructure person, and you can get into the details and the nitty-gritty on the networking protocols and moving packets, and there's still a lot of really cool stuff happening in that space. You can be up in the collaboration space where it's pure cloud delivered applications, contact security space. You can be in the cloud infrastructure, private cloud space. You can be in the Internet of Things space. There's so many cool things that Cisco as a company is doing, and I've been blessed to be able to have some of the advantages of staying at a single company, but being able to do different things. And the market now moves so fast. Cloud enables things to move so fast. It's just crazy how quickly things are moving these days.
That brings up one last question, and I think this is a good one. Is this pace of innovation, is it ultimately kind of bad in a way? Like, I think you're talking about, you got to pick a database, and from day one, you've got technical debt because you just never know what new hot technology that's better, faster is going to emerge. Like, I think it was Tim Crawford, one of our more recent guests, said, that the pace of innovation, we almost need to give people a minute to catch their breath. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do. It's funny. There was a chart that I actually used to use in customer briefings a bunch of years ago, and it was all about the pace of innovation, and it was all about it showed various technologies over time, from technology introduction to sort of mass adoption. And there was things like, the automobile and the train and airplanes. And as you've continued to move forward in history, every curve has gotten shorter and it's shot up quite a bit faster. And so I'd say that's one of the, is it bad? No, I don't think it's bad. I definitely don't think it's bad. Does it create challenges for enterprises when there's so many options and so many choices in terms of, which cloud to use, what language to develop in? Am I in Python? Am I in Ruby? Am I in Node? So there's a lot of options out there, and making some of those initial decisions and sort of, well, I got to pick one and get started. I think that's good. Another thing I love about the cloud, and I love about sort of the iterative development model, agile development model, is unlike an ASIC, which is sort of the hardware chips that run, our routers and switches. When you make a decision on, the design for one of those, because the process from when you make those decisions to when those chips ultimately get taped out and manufactured and shipped, is 18 plus months. And so if you make a mistake, that's going to be a really costly mistake. The thing I love about application development, especially in the cloud, is I can get started really quickly and easily just by leveraging cloud services. And if I'm, making MVPs and I'm quickly iterating and working with customers, I could be totally wrong, but then get that feedback that I'm totally wrong and make a quick decision and make a quick pivot, and I can be continually evolving. And so, the shorter you keep those development cycles in terms of getting customer feedback and delivering new capabilities, the quicker, the less painful your mistakes are, the better it is to make mistakes, because then you can learn from those and move on. But the key is you got to be able to iterate quickly, and that's another thing that the cloud gives you that that you can't get or you couldn't get when you're building and developing hardware, which is why I love this space.
If only we had a click to restore from backup button for life. If you can only go back to some point in your past where you made a silly mistake.
No, I forgot to take that snapshot.
Let's go back and do it over. I wish. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Y'all do yourselves a favor, subscribe to this podcast. Follow Dave Lively at Dave Lively, and follow us at Cisco Cloud. Thank you so much for joining us. Dave, say bye.
Bye. Thanks, Nikki.